All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're doing a straightforward analysis, looking at publicly available data from online forums to really understand the health risks being discussed out in the open within these communities.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by defining the practice at the heart of all this. Then we'll look at actual documented cases, do a deep dive into a major scare in Baltimore, touch on the risk of unprotected oral sex, and wrap it all up with some key takeaways.
Okay, first things first. To make sense of any of this, we've got to establish a clear baseline. We need to know exactly what practice we're talking about.
So the term you see over and over in these forums is BBFS. It's an acronym that stands for Bareback for Service, and it means exactly what it sounds like: unprotected sexual intercourse. This is the activity at the center of all the data we're about to see.
Now that we've defined the term, let's get to the heart of the matter: the real-world consequences. These forums aren't just talking in hypotheticals. They're full of specific and, frankly, pretty alarming documented cases of disease transmission. And wow, this table really gives you a snapshot of the scope of the problem. You can see a whole range of diseases and risks being discussed, and look at the locations. They're heavily concentrated in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. This isn't random. It's geographically clustered.
For example, the sources point to a pretty significant gonorrhea problem in Northern Virginia. We're talking about documented cases where clients or Johns have contracted the disease, suggesting this is a widespread issue, not just a one-off thing.
And check this out. This is a direct quote from a forum post back in 2016. A client complaining he got herpes from oral sex. This is a really crucial point because it shows that documented risks go way beyond just intercourse.
And if you thought one infection was bad, it can get even more complicated. Here we have a documented case from Maryland where a provider reported getting 2 STDs at the exact same time: chlamydia and gonorrhea. It just goes to show how the risk can multiply.
It's not just about the direct health issues either. These forums sometimes act as a kind of informal warning system, flagging some really serious criminal cases. Here you see 2 different situations involving HIV transmission that crossed state lines and led to arrests.
Okay, so now we're going to zoom in and do a real deep dive on one specific event that, according to the sources, caused a massive community-wide alert. Let's talk about the Baltimore syphilis scare.
I mean, this headline from a forum post in October 2014 says it all, doesn't it? Syphilis scare hits BBFS Baltimore community. You can just feel the urgency and the panic jumping off the screen. This was a real-time crisis playing out online.
And the details of the case, well, they're just stark. A provider was found to have stage 3 syphilis. That's the most severe late stage of the disease. She was known for providing these unprotected services, and on top of all that, she was reportedly pregnant. The posts even alleged that some clients retaliated against her after finding out they'd been infected. It's a true public health nightmare.
So we've focused a lot on intercourse, but that isn't the whole picture. The forum data shows a really clear emerging trend where the conversation starts to shift toward other unprotected acts.
And right around November of 2014, there's this noticeable new trend in the discussions. Suddenly, there's a surge of posts about the fear of getting HPV from unprotected oral sex, specifically in the DC and Maryland areas. The focus of the community's concern was expanding.
So this slide really gets to the point. It's easy to make the assumption that the risk is all tied to one specific act, but the reality, according to these sources, is much broader. We're seeing documented transmissions and very real fears explicitly linked to unprotected oral sex for diseases like herpes and HPV.
So, what's the bottom line here? What does all this data tell us when you put it all together? Well, we've synthesized it into a pretty concise operational advisory based directly on what's being discussed in these communities.
So here it is, a 4-step summary. And again, this isn't our advice. This is what the data is screaming. First, you have to acknowledge the high prevalence of these diseases. They are not isolated incidents. Second, recognize that the risks aren't just from one act. Oral transmission is a huge part of the conversation. Third, identify the regional hotspots, especially the DMV. And finally, and this is so important, the forum members themselves are constantly calling for frequent testing. They see it as an absolutely critical strategy.
Which brings us to our final thought. It's a question that goes beyond just the data. When all of these risks are so openly documented and discussed within the community itself, what are the factors that continue to drive this kind of high-risk behavior? There's no easy answer, but it's something worth thinking about.